I'm Alana Pierce, and if you don't know me, I'm a video game writer working with Sony's Santa Monica studio, but I also do podcasts and charity streams and a whole bunch of other stuff that I won't bore you with. Mostly just thank you all for joining me here today. It's so nice to see so many people's faces in person. I feel like after the last 2 years, which have felt like an entire decade, if I'm being honest, it's just so nice to actually see people in person, even if, like, maybe it's a little bit weird. Like, it's still not really used to if I'm supposed to shake people's hands or not. Still figuring it out. Yeah, I hope you're all having a great time catching up on all the sessions and conversations that I'm sure we've all been missing for the last 2 years. They're obviously really important to the industry. And yeah, I don't want to harp on about this for too long because we've all heard about it constantly and it sucks, but it definitely does feel strange to realize that you all have legs. I feel like I'm so used to seeing people on Zoom calls or Teams meetings just from here up now. It's good to remind myself that people are full-bodied and not just the webcams that we see. So thank you all for coming. Obviously, a lot of things have changed for game development itself over the past 2 years. Not only have indie devs missed out on some of the incredible networking opportunities that events like GDC are so helpful for, but we've also all just had to get used to our offices also being in our homes. I lived in a studio apartment up until November, and let me tell you, having your bedroom and your living room and your kitchen and your office all be in one 300 square foot box is not ideal, especially in LA. It was very hot. Would not recommend it. But of course, a lot of people had it a lot worse than I did. And most developers also had to get used to rebalancing their entire work and personal lives. And a whole lot of games got delayed, which of course happens. Frankly, as numerous injustices have racked our world, I think we've all just been doing the best that we can to support our colleagues and friends and families and communities going through a whole bunch of difficult times right now. I do want to give a really specific shout out to the several game studios in Ukraine: Ubisoft Kyiv, 4A Games, Roommate Studio, GCS Game World, Beat Shapers, Best Way, Frogwares, and Vostok Games, to name a few. I can't imagine what they're going through. Saying something like, I hope you're okay, really doesn't feel like enough by any stretch, but I did want to take the time to acknowledge them somehow. In any case, that is enough from me. Today we are celebrating the developers' renaissance and the positive forces shaping our industry with a series of 3 talks. Our first speaker will break down how Eidos Montreal rethought their balance between well-being and efficiency in a remote hybrid work environment. Joining us via live stream, please welcome Davina Anfossi, head of studio at Eidos Montreal.
Hello, hello. Do you hear me?
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm good. You?
Very good. Glad to confirm this is live. Thank you so much for joining us. I won't take up any more of your time. I'm going to head off stage, but everybody, enjoy.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Davina Mackey, Eidos Montreal studio head. Thank you for being here. Just to reassure you, I have a full body, even in Zoom. Actually, I would have liked to meet you in person, but at Eidos, we have decided that it's too early to travel. And we are actually facing a new wave here in Quebec. So be ready. And let's start. So beyond the expert, I am an introvert person who needs preparation, analysis, and above all, listening before being comfortable expressing my opinion. And as you can hear, I have a nice French accent. So you will understand that today I'm stepping out of my comfort zone. Please be patient with me. And let's start. So, a bit of context, why we decided to shift the organizational culture here at Eidos and how and what kind of results we obtained to date. So quickly, on that slide, as you can read, I have some experience in the gaming industry. But what is important here is that I have also worked in mature industries like automotive and toys. Not that I did not want to work in the gaming industry when I finished school, but in 1995, it was not that easy in France. Actually, Infograms, Atari Interactive now, refused to let me in. Thank you, guys. But in the end, it has been a chance, to be honest. It has a big impact on my approach and vision, and I hope you will see that through this presentation. And here are two examples on how my previous experiences can influence me. We are currently living in a period of consolidation in our industry, but the automotive industry already lived through an era of consolidation decades ago. I see it as an opportunity to read into the future and learn from their experience. Another example, the toy industry is a pioneer in exploiting its IPs and thus reaching a much wider audience and amortizing its creation costs on different products. More context about Quebec. As you can read here on that slide, all major studios and publishers have a local branch here, especially in Montreal, with more than 200 studios. So no need to say that it's very tough here. And it's easy also to understand why a company culture is very strategic. And in March 2020, when COVID-19 hit, we went the final stage here at Montreal, at Eidos Montreal, of our testing of a virtual desktop approach, a way to counter full employment in Quebec. So it only took us one day to decide to switch to work from home. 500 employees deployed in 2 weeks, even before the recommendations of the public health department. From that moment, as for the majority of the industry, our context changed, making the competition tougher than ever also. There is no border anymore with the advent of remote work. Being separated, we quickly implemented wellness surveys, highlighting issues related to the pandemic, of course, like stress, isolation, family overload, to name these. But we also realized that we did not really know the Eidosians and their concerns. Not that we did not have employee well-being at heart, but since we were all working together in one place, we assumed we knew each other, which is totally wrong. As a first step, and based on the results of these surveys, we implemented some quick actions. Setting up studio and project showcases for more visibility, setting up a weekly studio meeting named Virtual Beer Time. Yes, before the pandemic, every Friday, at the end of the day, we took to get together to have a chat. And we decided to replicate that moment with the Virtual Beer Time, to see each other, to get together, to stay informed, and answer questions, of course. We also organize online sessions with a psychologist for people who feel isolated or overloaded with family. We improve insurance covering. We organize a lot of activities, sport, cooking, gardening activities, online activities. So I'm very proud that we were able to act quickly to implement these actions. But at the end, it was not enough. How to fix the problem of circulation of information, how to get to know each other better. With a studio of approximately 500 experts, the observation is simple. The well-being of the employees and the performance of the studio cannot rest on the 4 or 5 experts of the upper management. It's too pressure, not good for their well-being, and proved to be unrealistic and ineffective. It was time to put into practice a philosophy we had been thinking about for a couple of years, an approach based on collective intelligence and accountability. We needed to move from a standard organization to an ecosystem, an environment that supports and promotes self-expression. But don't forget, we were in the middle of a pandemic. So is it the best time to add major changes? Indeed, beyond the technical and logistical challenges of remote work, it was necessary to redefine the development methods too, already involving significant changes for everyone. So again, is now the best time to add major changes? For us, the answer is yes. Status quo is not an option. We have to be true with the studio values, which are people, courage, business savvy, and continuous improvement. It was also critical to resolve, at least reduce, our difficulty in detecting problems. So we began our transition from an organization based on common policies, rules, to a cultural approach based on self-expression. But we had to start to create a workspace in which experts can express their ideas and opinions. It may seem surprising, but the biggest challenge in this approach is to deprogram ourselves. Forget our old reflex of control, hierarchy, old artifacts from the industrial era. And there is no magic recipe. Everything goes through communication, communication, and communication. Encouragement to take initiative, promoting external and internal initiatives. It has been key for us to show that it's not just words, but that it's reality and feasible. So the studio has led by example by putting into practice 2 initiatives that promote empowerment and autonomy. First, flexibility in working hours, helping 77% of the employees, and workplace flexibility. So there is nothing perfect, and it will be a long process. But there are more and more initiatives, and the studio management is no longer the only entity to decide for the studio performance and Eidosians' well-being. The Eidosians are now more proactive and create working groups on their own and feel encouraged to participate in the life of the studio. Here are 2 examples of progress we made. Example 1. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, competition is tough in Quebec. So during a studio meeting, a virtual beer time, we were discussing the problem, and an Eidosian decided on the spot to create a retention committee. And it quickly grew, bringing together a dozen experts, initiating surveys, meetings, and developing proposals. The good thing about that initiative is that no one questioned it, and no questioned the initiative, and the time spent by the experts in this committee. Example 2. After we switched to work from home, we detected a drop of productivity. Several causes for it. Working remotely, communication channels have multiplied. Slack, emails, phone, Zoom, Teams, just to name this, causing a lot of disturbance during the day. Boundary between private life and work is now blurred. But that way is not sustainable in the medium long term. Stress and fatigue take over, and efficiency, productivity are greatly reduced. And like every company, we also face the great resignation. In this case, collective intelligence has been key. We all work to propose ideas to improve our efficiency and question our current methods. After a month of work, we decided to start a test with several action points, which aims to improve studio performance and our well-being, giving birth to a work program of 32 hours per week over 4 days. Because we all work together to find a solution, the acceptance rate for this gigantic change was extremely high. We monitor the test to learn and adjust, of course. For example, we know that we are in the right direction, but there is still work to do. Few numbers. Approximately 9% of Eidosians are at the moment not able to complete all the work schedule for their week in 4 days. 32 hours. Only 6% of Eidosians are not able to have a work rhythm that allows them to finish their work week without being exhausted. And only 7% of Eidosians are less productive with this new program. So at the end, it's great results. I'm very, very happy. It's very positive, but we still have to adjust and test new things to make sure that everyone feels comfortable at work and have a well-balanced private life, of course. So all the Eidosians have at the heart the studio of performance, because Eidos is an ecosystem where people are linked around the same values, valued as human beings, and have the same decisions that affect them. In conclusion, our learning showed that making the structure more complex and heavy by adding more managers as the company grows should not be the first action. Preparing for growth by building a culture of accountability, participation without silos can yield more impressive results. There is nothing stronger than collective intelligence and a structure in perpetual adjustment according to needs. With an ever-increasing collective participation that unites us, we continue to learn at Eidos, explore, and test new avenues, which I hope to share with you next year. Quick examples. Remove job descriptions. Every Eidosian should feel free to participate to the success of the studio by any way. Remove the management of rest holiday. Why should we manage the rest time? Every expert is better placed to judge. Train a supportive leadership for greater professional autonomy. Decentralization of budget to the experts. Revise the structure toward a more agile and efficient ecosystem, etc., etc. So we still have a lot of work, as you can see. Thank you for listening. I hope this will be useful for you, and thank you very much.
I wanted to say thank you, David, for enlightening us as to what worked and what didn't in your studio's journey. Also, I could listen to that accent forever. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Take care.
So now we are going to shift gears towards addressing the social factors that affect our daily lives. Our next speaker will share initiatives that Sony Interactive Entertainment took to support DE&I efforts. Please welcome to the stage Director of Support Services and Operations and Black at PlayStation Employee Network President, Davina Mackey.
That was awesome, right? Throughout history, we've witnessed many examples of movements when a group of people work together to advance their shared ideas. We've been affected by the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, the right to vote movement, the LGBTQ+ movement, the Me Too movement, and the Black Lives Matter movement. All of these movements make and are making change in our society. Every industry, every company, every employee has been impacted by a movement at some point in time. And the video game industry is not exempt. So the video game industry is facing its own DE&I movement. And the news media regularly has stories about our industry falling short. But there's an opportunity for us to make a significant difference. There are people in this room who are immersed in DE&I. And like me, you're committed to creating a better work environment that serves everyone. But I've been working in this space for over 5 years. And some of you may be brand new to DE&I. I want to thank you so much for being here and taking the steps to become active or to become an ally. And no matter how new you are or how experienced in the field, Whatever contribution you can make now, it really matters. See, we all face the same challenges. How do we change our behavior? How do we change our practices, our procedures? How do we change our culture so that every employee knows and feels that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is relevant and carries weight in our organizations? At Sony Interactive Entertainment, our approach to DE&I required a paradigm shift, pre- and post-pandemic. And I'm excited to have a discussion with you, and I look forward to hearing your ideas about your own paradigm shifts after the talk. So looking back, our paradigm pre-pandemic was different. Our employee networks were juiced about bringing awareness about their culture to the organization. We were great at planning network events with ethnic food and ethnic dancing, having keynote speakers who made us aware of current events or taught us about key times in history for a demographic. And we visited marginalized schools and told students about opportunities in the video game industry. We donated money through our Benevity system to nonprofit organizations like the Boys and Girls Club, like Girls Who Code and Game Heads. And we were very successful at cultural awareness, that paradigm. However, there is more to DE&I than cultural awareness. We all know this. We must have action that moves the needle, and that's a new paradigm. So we were starved. We didn't have much transparency or access to global demographic data. We didn't know the number of women versus men in the company. We didn't know how many Black or Asian or Latinx employees were in the company. And we barely knew how many people were in the company from a global perspective. And I'm talking about the general population of SIE. So we were data starved. The US, they had their own DE&I strategy. Europe, their own strategy. Japan, they addressed strategy, DE&I in their own way. And our executive leadership was fine with handling DE&I locally. But we realized we needed a global strategy. DE&I was driven through ENET initiatives locally and not embedded into SIE's core goals and objectives, which are global. So how did this play out? Well, what we observed was there was no incentive for middle management to advocate for DE&I or even to participate or even encourage participation from their subordinates. And what that meant was there was no DE&I movement globally. So pre-pandemic, there were less than 3% of Black employees at Sony Interactive Entertainment. And at the director and up, I would say that I was a pink unicorn. I was the highest ranking Black female employee in PlayStation Studios. And there was no one like me. And if you take into consideration all the population of SIE, well, I graduated to a unicorn, because sprinkled throughout the organization, there were a few colleagues just like me. And I'm the kind of woman that once I commit to something, I follow through. So I didn't mind being a trailblazer for our Black population. And I loved rolling up my sleeves and being a part of the Black at PlayStation movement. And guys, I'm sorry, there you go. The pandemic hits. It's May 25th, 2020, and George Floyd's death was a tragedy witnessed by the world. Now, this was a pivotal moment for Sony and SIE, and for most corporations across the globe. You all remember where you were on 9/11 and how you felt watching what happened. Well, I can tell you the Black community has a similar reaction to May 25th, 2020. We know what we were doing and how it made us feel watching it. And sadly, we didn't think anyone would be held accountable like so many times in our history. What was unprecedented was Sony and SIE's reaction and support. There was a movement in external communication, and SIE posted a statement on Twitter denouncing systemic racism and violence against the Black community. And then they placed the hashtag at the end of that statement, hashtag Black Lives Matter. Honestly, I thought it was in a parallel universe. It was extraordinary. And then a month later, I get a call from the head of DE&I. She said, Davina, Jim Ryan, who is our CEO, he would like an audience with the Black at PlayStation leadership. We were freaking amazed, and I'll put an exclamation point at the end of that. Jim was attentive and authentic. He listened to us, and surprisingly to those who hear this, Black at PlayStation for the first time felt like we finally could ask for what we wanted and needed without retribution. Well, we put a strategy together. We asked for programs. We asked for sponsorship, and we asked for proper funding, and we got it. Now, written as a response to George Floyd's killing, John Platt, who is the first Black chairman and CEO of Sony ATV Music Publishing, wrote an article called A Change Must Come. And in addition to that provocative open letter, he had the audacity to ask Sony Board of Directors and convince them to donate $100 million to organizations dedicated to social justice initiatives. And they listened. They gave the donation. It was split amongst all the Sony subsidiaries so that they could support the nonprofit organizations of their choice. And this was a life-altering situation to our movement. SIE even added another $1 million donation. So Black at PlayStation, we leveraged this, and we facilitated a panel with John Platt, Jim Ryan, and Tiffany Hester. Now, this was pivotal because it was the first time the Black employees globally would have a seat at the table or get to hear from a Black CEO. This was amazing. SIE also did something phenomenal. They approved a Black Lives Matter theme on the PS4 platform. So imagine the fist pump, black screen, yellow piping, PlayStation 4 platform. This was huge and unconventional. SIE's logo and the commitment to quality is so high that this was extraordinary for us. But they believed in the Black Lives Matter movement, and they did it. And they even went further. Guys, there are people walking around globally with a Black Lives Matter t-shirt and PlayStation symbols. Again, huge. And one of the greatest accomplishments of this next step paradigm was the DE&I's initiative to level the playing field for all eNets. See, each eNet was assigned an executive sponsor who reports directly to Jim, who can advocate on their behalf and ensure goals, objectives, and challenges are addressed at the highest level. For example, pre-pandemic, Black at PlayStation's executive sponsor was at the senior director level. And Jay, we love you to death. He is now our advisor. But after this pivotal moment, after the meeting with Jim Ryan, Black at PlayStation was assigned the dopest executive sponsor at PlayStation, who's director Jim Ryan. His name is Herman Holtz, and he is the head of PlayStation Studios, and he has been an amazing all-around great leader. And I've had the pleasure of being mentored by him for a year. It's been amazing. Now today our DE&I movement and new paradigm is global. The DE&I global operation team, well, they're now in the US, they're in Europe, and they're in Japan. And together, they drive a global strategy. Today, we have data. We are no longer data starved. And we appreciate the women at PlayStation for being assertive and leading the charge to request for demographic data. And each ENET came on board to support this request. And the Senior Vice President of Human Resources, Orit Ziv, and her team, which includes DE&I, they came through as promised. We now have access to demographic data, and having access to this allows SIE to set KPIs and metrics to move the needle, especially for those internal groups who are underrepresented. Today, we drive belonging. Orit and the DE&I team organized a deep dive meeting to allow all ENETs to present their 3-year strategy. One of the goals came from Pride at PlayStation, and it was to help enhance features in our enterprise systems to allow for non-binary gender identities. Pride at PlayStation was able to advocate for our colleagues who are impacted, and a change was made immediately. We can add pronouns and name designations to HR systems. We have guidelines for our email signatures and collaboration tools. And this was a significant endorsement of DE&I culture and values. Today, we enable inclusion. The DE&I team facilitated the first global survey to define and enable inclusion and belonging for our global employees. This new paradigm ensures all levels in the organization have a voice to express how they feel, and they are able to be their whole self at work and still feel included or that they belong. Go back one, please. Oh, sorry. Today, we work to enforce equity. We even have a policy that encourages recruiters and hiring managers to execute equitable hiring practices by including qualified diverse talent in the pool of candidates for each interview. Now, we're at the early stages of this, and it's working. Okay, so let's take a survey. What is the percentage of women that represent the consumer base in the video game industry? Now, I'm going to give you 4 options: 15%, 30%, 50%, or 70%. By a showing of hands, who thinks it's 15%? How about 30%? How about 50%? 70%? All right, the most of you said 50%, and you're right, it's 50%. And what's great, our courageous leader, Jim Ryan, well, he has driven change. His leadership team is 50% women, which represents the global consumer base. And looking at the entire women working in the video industry, well, they represent 30%. So we have work to do. And you may ask yourselves, does your executive team reflect your consumer base? And what is the percentage of women working at your company? These are our ENETs. They're doing amazing work within their communities and in collaboration with one another. I'm going to point out a few of them. Vets at PlayStation, well, they partnered with the Wounded Warriors Project, both to raise money and help veterans find employment after their military service. Black at PlayStation collaborated with the Black Collegiate Gaming Association to support 16 historically Black colleges and universities to open gaming labs facilities on each of their campuses. This is a first for HBCUs. Unidos at PlayStation, well, they are in liaison with SIE and a nonprofit organization called Latina in Tech. And they're running recruiting events that advertise open opportunities in the Latin community. And one of our most encouraging things that I witnessed was watching API at PlayStation launch their eNet during the pandemic. They were able to provide education, trainings, and most importantly, a safe space to process and protect against anti-Asian hate. And finally, I want to recognize ABLE at PlayStation. They joined Valuable 500 and collaborated with the DE&I team to benchmark our accessibility and disability inclusion through Disability In and their Disability Equity Index. SIE received top scores of 100 and earned the title 2021 Best Place to Work for Disability Inclusion. So post-pandemic, we're working in our new paradigm, and the DE&I movement is global and strategic. However, there's still a lot of work to do, and I am proud to be a part of the continued movement. We don't have a strategy fully ironed out. However, I do have 5 points and ideas for the future. We need managers and leaders who are aware of their bias and can use empathy to make better business decisions that are fair. Now, our managers and leaders are worldwide. So to scale this effort, we will use training to implement this strategy effectively. We want to deploy a sponsorship program for women and underrepresented talent so that they have an advocate to support them in elevating their career. We need a rotational leadership program for directors and above to give employees a well-rounded knowledge of the organization, which will give them a career path into leadership roles. A great idea is a diverse studio that focuses on diverse content and has diverse talent to design compelling stories and games that represent the consumer base. And I'm passionate about number 5. This is a paradigm, a program that focuses on the future generation. I imagine that students in the 7th grade would have access to an academy that has SIE quality curriculum. And from middle school to high school to university, they can select a discipline. And once in university, they have access to internships, mentorships, and sponsorships. And they finish with the certification that puts them above the rest of their peers. They then go on to attend an apprenticeship program and then land a job in the video game industry, hopefully at SIE. There's a DE&I framework that I really like called the Merit-Worthy Framework. It was created by Dr. Stephanie Creary, a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. It is an acronym that helps elevate DE&I work in an organization, and it offers structure on how companies can change their DE&I paradigm to a merit-worthy practice that is valued across the company. And there are 2 topics from the framework that I want to point out. M stands for Make DE&I Goals Actionable, Measurable, Evidence-Based. So leaders, they respond to data. We all agree? And they should make sure that DE&I goals are inspiring, measurable, and actionable so that DE&I work that is expected appears attainable by everyone in the organization. And T stands for work as a core part of the organization rather than peripheral work. DE&I is traditionally nested in HR. There are opportunities for paradigm shifts here. So marketing is its own function, and it's direct to the CEO. Legal is its own function, direct to the CEO. HR is its own function that is direct to the CEO. And I think DE&I should be its own function that is direct to the CEO. And to take it further, the leader should have a title like Chief Diversity Officer, Senior Vice President of DE&I, Head of DE&I. See, Salesforce is just a few blocks away from here, right? And Laura Castillo-Martinez is the Chief Equity Officer at Salesforce, and she reports directly to the CEO. And if Salesforce can do it, so can companies in the video game industry. When I agreed to take on this talk, my hope was each of you would leave with one or two ideas that you would think in more depth about and apply them to your own organization. So we have a lot of work to do, but I am so glad that you are on this journey with me. It has been an honor and a pleasure to be with you today, and I am so glad that people like you are on the DE&I movement with me. Thank you.
Obviously, a very big thank you to Davina. The whole industry is better for having people like her in it 1,000 times over. That was awesome. It's always good to highlight the importance of organizations taking a stance against injustice, and we appreciate her talking here today. So we're going to close out our series of talks today with a story about how to elevate games without compromising artistic or business integrity, all the while killing it with kindness. Please welcome to the stage co-founder of Devolver Digital, Mike Wilson.
Hey guys. Hi. My name is Mike Wilson. I am here to talk to you today about Facebook. It's worse than that, actually. I'm here to talk to you about a Facebook post of mine from the fall that somebody here read and thought I should come talk about. I don't usually give talks, as I'm sure will become readily apparent to you in the next few moments. But I'm here because this one felt like it was maybe a story worth telling. The post in question was one that I made from my homeland of Shreveport, Louisiana, on November 3rd. It's from whence I came and from whence id Software came, actually, which is a big part of my journey in this industry. My post was about the fact that this little company I had helped found in 2009, Devolver Digital, was through a lot of hard work from all of my partners, going public on the London Stock Exchange that very night, or the next morning, for a ridiculous amount of money, a much bigger level of success than we ever would have dared dream. But, you know, these days, that's not such a big deal, right? We hear wild numbers all the time and ludicrous valuations and all of this. And what I wanted people to know in my post was what I was actually proud of there was we had managed to achieve that level of success without making any compromise to the values that we started off with, which is, to be honest, just kindness, respect for the artists who actually make games, and generosity. So I thought I would take you through a little journey, my journey through this industry, because that's really the only one I know about. and try to explain to you how it was that we came to that stance as a video game publisher, working with independent studios all over the world. It's a long and sordid tale, because I'm getting kind of old. It started off in Shreveport, Louisiana, circa 1983. Don't worry, I only have 20 minutes. My father had just passed away. My mom had to go back to work. My siblings were all out of the house, older than me, out trying to make their way. And so I was spending a lot of time at home with the internet of the time, which was MTV on my television. It's my window to all the weirdness and all the possibilities out there that were beyond Shreveport, Louisiana, which I was actively trying to figure out how I was going to get out of, having promised my dad on his deathbed that I would. Well, I was thinking about developing games. I was playing a lot of Intellivision at the time, some ColecoVision, and while that seemed fascinating, it didn't seem very likely to make me more attractive to the opposite sex. I was 13. This was pretty important to me at the time, and so it also seemed a little hard, seemed a little challenging, like I was probably going to have to read some books or something. Whereas on MTV, a song came out that year called Money for Nothing by a band called Dire Straits. And for those of you who get your musical influences more from this millennium, I'll explain briefly. The song was generally about a bunch of warehouse workers having a laugh about rock stars with their long hair and their mink coats, not really working, and getting their money for nothing and their chicks for free, as the song went in that time. This was interesting to me. But I was again perplexed because I was like, A, I don't play an instrument, and B, that sounds pretty hard to learn. I don't have that kind of time or discipline. But then came Van Halen with David Lee Roth. There was a guy who didn't play an instrument at all, barely sang. All he did was bounce around on the stage in front of some very talented musicians who had worked all their lives to master their craft, just so that they could look at his boisterous ass bouncing around in front of them. I was like, this might be my guy. Fast forward to my first job, not in the games industry. My first full-time job was a place called Daiquiri Delight in Shreveport, Louisiana. For those who have not been to Louisiana, have not experienced this phenomenon, a daiquiri shop is basically a person in front of a row of boozy, icy machines, pulling ices and dispensing joy to the world. The reason I'm boring you with my story of Daiquiri Delight is because my first week there, I put a tip jar out, which had never existed in the history of this business, because I guess my predecessors and coworkers didn't feel like doing this was really worthy of someone's gratuity, given that they could not even stay in the room after they got it. Happy trails. The important part there is that's when I learned that not only did I not want to work very hard, but I wanted to make a lot of money. So I knew I had to be an executive. Problem is, I already had a daughter, and had married my high school sweetheart, and was no longer dreaming of being a rock star. I was just dreaming of, maybe getting out of Shreveport and having my daughter have a different life that it seemed she was doomed to. And luckily, after that, I realized that the only person that was going to hire an executive with not quite a Bachelor of Arts from LSU in Shreveport was either myself or one of my friends. This puts you in a place where it's much harder to both make a lot of money as a startup executive, to make a lot of money, or not work very hard. I managed to do it, did both of them, it's true. I got a job. Luckily, one of my friends was one of the guys that made Doom. He was a pen and paper artist I met in high school, and he became, his name is Adrian Carmack. And so I was watching my friends at id Software have this success, and I believed that I could be part of that because they had come from the same place. They had somehow assembled in a lake house in Shreveport, Louisiana, before someone lured them off with 10 grand to Texas to go make Wolfenstein 3D. My friends did quite well with that game. People mailed them paper checks, and they mailed them back floppy disks with a full version of Wolfenstein on it. Before you know it, lo and behold, my friends were getting rich. They dispatched me to this company. I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead. Right after that, these same 5 guys decided to go ahead and make a game called Doom in about 6 months. This time, a lot more people mailed in checks, and they mailed out a lot more floppy disks. And, now they were getting properly rich. And it was around this time that the smiling men in suits started to swarm around, as they do whenever a new industry is born, especially an industry led by artists and engineers and people that had no representation, no guilds, no unions, still today, sadly. So the smiling men in suits told my friends at id Software that, you know what, that game needs to be in Walmart. And they were right. They put Doom 2 in Walmart, and now there were truckloads of cash being dropped off at my friend's doorstep. But what they noticed was there were much bigger truckloads of cash being dropped off at their publisher, GT Interactive's doorstep at that same time, which seemed odd, since these guys really were brand new to the games business. Their other products at the time were Richard Simmons' Deal-A-Mill CD-ROM and Fabio's Screensaver. So, I shit you not. And then they got Doom, and they went public for $1 billion. And my friends at id Software were like, that seems odd. You know, we're doing pretty well for ourselves, but man, those guys that just put the box in the stores really did well for themselves. They hired me after a while. There was a brief stop at this company called Dwango, which was a way for people to play Doom from home against one another before you could do that on the internet. I'll skip over that one pretty quickly, but I did learn a couple of things at Dwango. One was competitive gamers are nuts. 2 was strip clubs are not really my thing. Important things to learn as you start your business travel in 1995. Luckily, my friends at id Software were impressed with the progress we had made at Dwango with no experience in a brand new industry and people like myself outselling franchises. And they hired me at id, and they explained to me that they weren't happy with their publisher. They were pretty sure they were getting much less money per unit than they should have. And they were pretty sure that these guys and their interactions with them, were not the geniuses behind why their game was successful. So they put me on a plane. I came on as VP Marketing and Distribution at id Software. They put me on a plane. I put on my combat boots, and I tied my mullet back into a business ponytail, and I went to New York City to go do battle with these mysterious kings of industry at Good Times Interactive. Yep. And what I met there were some inspiring people. They were inspiring in the same way that I hope to be inspiring to you today, in that they were just not that impressive. Because look, if they had just been geniuses and a bunch of Ivy Leaguers, and doing things that I could never do, I probably would have slunk home and tucked my tail and told my friends that their deal was fine. But I didn't, because what I found there was a bunch of guys from the record industry and the toy industry that had no idea about video games or how they were made, did not really care. They just wanted that sweet, sweet cash, and lots of it. They also wanted to take credit for the work that my friends had done. Luckily, my friends were some of the first to fight for their intellectual property rights, to put their name on the front of the box of the thing that they made, things that seem obvious in retrospect, but were pretty against the grain at the time. So I set about learning what these guys were doing. Here's the secret. It's not that hard. Publishing, I'm sorry for anybody here that works in publishing or marketing or finance, but it's not that hard, guys. It's not that hard, certainly not compared to making a game or making a hit game. So I was like, these guys they hired a sales force, they hired a PR firm, they hired an ad agency, they hired manufacturing, and they hired distribution. I learned all of this in roughly a month. And I just hired the same people. I just hired the same companies they did. And I went back and I told my friends, I was like, okay, well, good news, bad news. Good news is we can publish your next game, Quake, ourselves. We can do it. I've got all the same people lined up. The bad news is you were absolutely right, and these people were taking roughly 4 times more per unit than they should have been taking, which did not make my friends very happy. We did, luckily it took a year longer than we thought to get Quake out the door, and so I had some time to actually learn what I was doing. And we shipped Quake shareware ourselves. We got it distributed nationwide, just like the big bad guys in New York with all their Fabio screensaver prowess. And we did well enough to be able to renegotiate our deal with GT Interactive to what was, it was more than 3 times what they had been making off Doom 2. So I had done my job. id Software at that time did not want to become a publisher. They were pretty good at making games. They wanted to keep making games. So I left there and went on to Ion Storm with John Romero, which was another meant to be a powerhouse developer. I'm going to skip over that one because it was only a year of my life, but I did learn a couple of important things there. I learned how disastrous the idea of what we all thought was cool could be in this industry, because we were, you know, I was 26. I was the CEO of this new company in the top of a skyscraper in Dallas. We all had our 90s hair and our combat boots and our attitudes and our arrogance, and it was gross. It was gross. But I'm so glad I went there. I'm glad I experienced the full effects of what some ego can do to some bright and hardworking young game developers. Because I also met a guy named Doug Myers there, who I have a son named after now. And he was the opposite of that. He really redefined what cool was in my head and what success looked like. And it wasn't that he preached anything, he just demonstrated it. He was so kind, just naturally so kind and humble and present, and made everyone that he interacted with, whether it was for days or weeks or 10 seconds, feel seen and appreciated. And sadly, he passed away at a very young age, not too long after that, but definitely not just me, but my partners that formed God Games Gathering of Developers after that. It informed all of us of sort of the goal, what we were trying to get to. God Games Gathering of Developers was a holy crusade for the artist side of the industry against these evil bastard publishers that we had struck out against. I had now negotiated deals, renegotiated with GT Interactive, moved id over to Activision, renegotiated there, and then negotiated the most lucrative deal in history for Ion Storm with really nothing to show for it. So I knew how far we could go, and I knew how much money there was on that other side of things. And I was like, well, here we go. What if we band a few studios together? And because most of these publishers only had 1 or 2 hits at the time anyway, so we're like, we can make those. And so we formed Gathering of Developers, which was sort of like a United Artists or Image Comics. It was artists first, staking our claim in the industry, putting out to the world what it meant to get a good deal from a publisher. And we just made a lot of noise, pissed a lot of people off. And honestly, like, yes, we wanted to be respectful to artists, and we wanted to give them their intellectual property rights, and we wanted to pay them fairly, and we wanted to make sure they were always credited above us. But it wasn't just because we were nice guys. It was literally, that was the giant hole in the industry. If any of the other publishers had been doing that, there would have been no need for us. So I thank you, 90s video game publishers. I truly feel like I stand on the shoulders of shitheads. God Games, like Image Comics and United Artists, we ended up selling out to the same evil bastards we struck out against. What I did learn there was about sociopathy being real, and about those ideas that we typically associate with business. You know, the idea of a shrewd business person, just meaning that they're going to take advantage of you as quickly as possible. And you know, the reason that most young people don't want to be a business person, it's really hard to identify heroes as business people. So here we were, having fought this crusade on behalf of these developers that left Microsoft and EA and Activision and GT to join us, risking their next projects with us, taking a stand. And there I was, my partners and I being completely taken advantage of by some proper sharks in New York. By the way, all of these companies that I'm naming here out loud and talking shit about, I'm sure they're all wonderful people now. This was the 90s. Things were different. I had hair. Anyway, we sold the company, and I can tell you without hyperbole, when I signed that deal, it felt like I was signing my own suicide note. It went pretty well, as suicides go. We all made some money. The developers made some money. Unfortunately, my friend Doug that I talked about died on the day that we could cash out, really robbing us of any joy there. But we had accomplished quite a bit, and we had proven that we could do it. And maybe we would catch our breath one day and do it again. Cut to a few years later, I had taken a break from games. I actually went back to work at Take-Two, which was really fun because I left in a blaze of glory, as you might imagine from my speech today. And I got to learn just how well we had done, how well it worked to treat artists with respect, to ship games when they were finished, when the artists told us they were finished, to let the artists have sign-off on all the PR and marketing, to let the game developers choose our games. We had 8 new million-unit selling franchises in 18 months, 2 years we existed before Take-Two bought us. So I got to learn all that from the inside. I got out of there as quickly as I could. And then, I did what every group does that has a good run in their 20s. We put the band back together in our 30s. It's called Gamecock Media Group. Same principles, except our brand, our sense of humor was very much about me at the time. And I was angry. I was hurt from what happened at God Games. I was angry at the industry. I was angry that everything was getting this rush to get bigger and be taken more seriously. Something in me that didn't sit right. Suffice to say, midlife crises are real. I had mine then, and then we had an economic collapse crisis on top of it. I recommend doing both of those at the same time, by the way. If you're planning your midlife crisis, go ahead and do it on top of economic collapse. It works out better for everybody. But at Gamecock Media Group, while our sense of humor was sort of bullyish and like, you're all so dumb, we're so cool, I met this guy, I hired this guy named Nigel Lowry. Nigel Lowry, we rescued from an ad agency, and he wanted to work in the game industry so badly that he wrote us a letter about it. And he said, I want this from the bottom of my pee-pee. And that was enough, right? He got the job, and out of the ashes of that company, after the economy collapsed and our billionaires panicked and pulled out our investment, Devolver was born, with just a few of us piecing together what money we had left, doing one game at a time, making it absolutely not about me. Big lesson there. It wasn't about anybody. In fact, we had a fictitious company spokesperson because we were so insistent that this didn't become about me or about anyone in the company. It was about this mission and this way of doing work. And luckily, we caught quite a tailwind with the new wave of indies that cropped up around that time. And we had a great run for the last 12 years. This is all the things people were saying about us. Punk rock label, Death Row Records, Sub Pop, basically everything but a game company. And then recently somebody called us, just last week, the HBO of video games. Amazing, we did it. So to pull this back a bit, I learned on the way here that this talk is supposed to be about how we adjusted to the pandemic. Devolver was already working virtually from the time we had a company. We were already actively supporting one another, checking in on each other. We had a sort of innate concern about the well-being of our developers. But it wasn't enough, because while we were having that incredible run and working with all these tiny teams, 1 or 2 people that made games like Hotline Miami or Enter the Gungeon with 3 people or Reigns with 1, I found out I had learned about depression personally after losing my friend Doug and losing God Games back in the day. And I had been to the depths to where some pills probably saved my life in that moment. And so ever since then, I had a concern and a heightened awareness of mental health issues in my own family and my community, and just how common it was. In fact, I ended up losing my sister. Her name was Dr. Lisa Michelle Wilson, PhD. She was a doctor of psychology, and she lived with crippling depression most of her life, and eventually decided to leave us. Suffice to say, mental health is first and foremost on my mind since then, and I came to know that several of our star developers, including some of the ones I just mentioned that made those hits for us, had become so distressed while making their game or shortly thereafter that 4 of them, within 6 months, individual stories had become institutionalized. Like, not just I need medicine, but literally working on their game from inside a mental health institution. So that's when I was just like, this ride started to mean a little bit less to me. And it wasn't because I didn't love the Devolver family. They're the absolute best, and nothing I ever do will be as fun as working with those guys. Nigel, the guy I mentioned before, really took the mission of what we were doing, a much kinder, more self-effacing sense of humor. And we had fun with the industry, but it was really having fun with ourselves, and then making sure our developers were getting rich and famous. But it wasn't enough anymore. And so while Devolver didn't really make any big changes during the pandemic, other than we couldn't tour anymore and started to really, that's when we would get together as all the shows we would do, we really started to feel the isolation. And I personally was well aware that not only was Devolver not about me, but it really didn't need me anymore if it ever did. Like, the brand was built, the vibe was built, the games were working, the team was in place. And while it's not about me, and something has to be about me, right? When you're isolated and working from home and not seeing your people, you start to ask some different questions. Especially, I was starting to see my adult daughters have some mental health struggles as well. So this led me to my personal adjustment, my personal recalibration during the pandemic, which was a series of events that led me to announce the company I announced last week. It's called Deepwell Digital Therapeutics. And this one's also not about me. This is a group of, I think we're up to 47 or so now, game developers, psychologists, neuroscientists, clinicians, regulatory professionals, huge group of people that have been volunteering their time for the last 3 to 15 months in service of defining a way where we can medicinalize games. And I'm not talking about gamification or edutainment. I'm talking about putting rails and understanding and information in your hands about how games are already quite therapeutic for people, and how a lot of people are already using them to sort of self-medicate in times of crisis. So I won't go too far into that. But that's what I'm doing with my time, because while it's not about me, what is about me and what is about all of you, regardless of whether you're a game developer or you work in publishing or financing, or your phone only takes NFTs, whatever it is, what is about you is what you get up and put your energy into every day. And for me, it has been such a gift to myself, to my coworkers, and to my family to get up every day with a little bit more of a mission, something that matters to me, a purpose. And that's what I wish for all of you as you go forth and doing battle to create the most compelling entertainment in the history of people. that can also, we've learned, be quite beneficial for people, both for those creating them and those playing them. And so what we've done over the last 18 months is built a hive, and it's up to the indie game developers of the world to bring the honey, which is what, right now, in this very moment, we're announcing our first Global Game Jam in conjunction with Global Game Jam, where we are inviting indie developers around the world to learn about what we're doing and to figure out how they can participate in making games that are scientifically beneficial for people, medically beneficial for people, should you so choose. So I hope you'll accept our invitation. I hope you'll learn about what we're doing and realize the power that you as creators wield, and realize how you can change your own relationship with the media that you take in. Because anything we take in this much of, whether it's food or water or air or media, it has an effect on us. It has a different effect on us, and it's different for each one of you. So I invite you to look into that and figure it out for yourselves. My name is Mike Wilson. Thank you all for your time. I'll see you soon.
A huge thank you to Mike for sharing the story of how Devolver came together. I wonder if that's the first time that anybody at a GDC stage has said the phrase pee-pee. There's a first for everything. But that is a wrap. I hope you all were as uplifted and informed as I was by these transformative stories. For more inspiration, join us back in this room tonight for the IGF and Choice Awards, where we honor the best and brightest in games. Doors open at 5:30 p.m. I look forward to seeing you all here. Have a great afternoon. Bye.